Welcome to Real Chat with Kat, the podcast that's all about real conversations for real transformation. I'm your host, Kat Polsinelli, professional speaker, MC, and best-selling international author. Here, we tackle the tough stuff, the mud that we all have found ourselves in. We talk about the pivots, the challenges, and the victories that shape our lives and our businesses. From overcoming trauma and finding your voice to navigating life's unexpected twists, we get raw, honest, and open. You'll hear from inspiring guests who share their stories of resilience, healing, and growth. Whether it's breaking through emotional abuse, embracing self-worth, or thriving in entrepreneurship, you'll find connection, empowerment, and the tools to keep you moving forward. So grab your favorite drink, settle in, and get ready for stories that hit home and conversations that make a difference. Let's get real together. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of Real Chat with Kat. I have a very special episode for you guys today. I am super excited to bring this one forward. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you know that I openly talk about struggles and things that I have been through. I talk about my domestic violence that I lived in for 10 years, but I've also had others that have shared stories in that capacity or in other realms. And today we get to kind of expand upon that to educate you, but to also let you know that you are not alone. So stay tuned. I'm super excited to have this conversation. Alicia, thank you so much for being a part of the podcast today.
Thank you, Kat. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to share.
Oh, I am so excited. We had such a good conversation the last time. I was like, I cannot wait to dive into this. Now I just got to watch my time and make sure that I stay focused. Alicia, as we dive in then, would you do us all a favor and tell everybody who you are and what it is that you do?
My name is Alicia Tappan. I am the founder and CEO of Survivor Led Solutions, a nonprofit that works with women of sexual exploitation. We do leadership development, professional development, training, and education. And then we also have created a continuum of care in our local area for women who are leaving incarceration and working back towards independence. I also have a book out called Brave Girl Diaries. It's the first of 3 in a series, really working on prevention and self-identification. And the next book that will be released, hopefully this year, 2026, is going to be Traumatic Truths. It's under the 2nd series of the Brave Girl Diaries, and that's working with intervention. And then I'm getting my PhD in forensic psychology. So hopefully that'll also be done within the next 24 months or less. I'm in dissertation mode. So I'm a candidate ready to go research.
Ooh, that is so cool. Okay, so Alicia's got a lot of things going on, but a lot of amazing things as well. And I want to kind of backtrack because I'm always fascinated by what leads people into these types of careers, right? And what led you into wanting to, the forensic psychology and going back to school and things like that. So can you give us a little bit of an insight? Like how did it come to be to get to here? How did we get into this space and why human trafficking?
Yeah. And I think most people can sort of assume we have some sort of calling or passion behind the topic because it is a hard topic. And it actually is a buzzkill at dinner conversations. Like people ask what you do and they're like, oh, how's the weather? Or they get really interested. So here's the skinny on my story. I am a survivor and I was trafficked in my high school years at 17 years old by a coach. And trigger warning, he was a bad guy disguised as a really, really good guy. We have to really teach people that it's not who people are afraid of, but who they spend the most time with, who gives them the most attention, who, celebrates them in a way that no one else does. And then that usually goes down the rabbit hole. So I do have lived experience where he trafficked me and 33 other women just like me. Well, girls, because we were in high school, we were still minors, and he gets caught. Unfortunately for him, he met me And we put him in prison for the rest of his life. But it took a battle of just trying to really understand what this thing was. Trafficking at the time was, I mean, barely talked about. It was just in legal legislation policy since 2000. So this was only a few years later.
Oh, wow.
Meaning, my small town where I grew up had no idea what this was. And how were we going to unfold all of the different moving pieces from money laundering and larceny to embezzlement, and then obviously sexual abuse that came with it, with my experience. So they labeled my case rape and conspiracy. I had no idea what really happened. And I spent a lot of my time having to regroup from that, having to retrain my brain, you know, a lot of therapy, but I didn't even know that I had a problem. I just thought, you know, I was raped in a hot tub, and that part of it made sense, rape. But
Mm-hmm.
conspiracy, like, what is that? How do you get therapy for that? How do you get services for this? I wasn't paranoid, right? I was involved with something. And so I had hmm, a lot of like closure that needed to happen, and a lot of unraveling of like how I got in this scenario in the first place. I was student council president, National Honor Society president. I was trying to be a doctor. I didn't know what kind. And then all of a sudden I found myself, you know, popping pills and drinking and smoking and cutting myself, and like just really terrible coping skills because no one taught us what this would look like, right? It was stranger danger, say no to drugs, right? Like,
Yeah.
and it wasn't that. This was a nice guy. I didn't know I was taking drugs. He roofied me. I didn't, you know, so it was just like there was no control over that. So it's very heavy when it comes
Mm-hmm.
to even the word itself. But after years of working in the clubs and getting involved in drugs and really losing my identity, and I met this guy who will become my husband, but he was the only man that I met that was like nice to me and like treated me with respect and told me I had potential. So, ladies, if you're listening and you have that guy in your life, keep him, no matter how hard you want to push him away, because that was my reality. I was good at like just burning people and moving to the next thing, and I was living a very fast life. But in 2014, we moved to Florida, and I met a woman that they called a survivor of human trafficking. And she was a few years younger than me at this time. So I'm probably about 30 years old almost. And she told me her story. And I swear, Kat, I was looking in the mirror. Like I thought that her story was my story, right? The
Oh,
setting was different, the
wow.
characters were different, but the plot was exactly the same. And
Mm-hmm.
she was still struggling. She was still struggling. And I wouldn't say that I had it all together by then, but that moment that label clicked, all of a sudden now I had supernatural knowledge. And I swear it was like a downpour. I knew more about human trafficking than anybody in my sphere. And I knew like recruiting and grooming and these tactics and like how charismatic they have to be, and you know the money that gets infiltrated in and out of consented spaces, like opening bank accounts on purpose, you know, just to funnel laundry money. So i I got passionate about telling my story. I wanted to change the narrative. I was like, people are doing this wrong. And the way that they treat people, because I experienced that. A lot of people were dismissing the victims, criminalizing them, which I had to take 2 charges just to prove that this man had alcohol and drugs at his house. Which I mean, he did, but I didn't even know that that's what was happening to me.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine going to college, right, with this like just this scar on your back and trying to hide it and trying to re-identify as like a normal freshman, and rewrite my story where the trauma just starts adding itself, you know, on top of one another. And
Mm-hmm.
I was a great student, but I was a party girl at the end of the day. And then now I'm 30 and I'm married, and all these flashbacks are coming back, and all these things that I thought I had tucked away and hidden with a key, you know, down into my secret space in my gut, you know, pushing it down as far as I could. And it was coming out, it was exploding out. And so I knew I needed help. And I started seeking therapeutic services that I'd never sought out before. A lot of people told me, you just have PTSD. Like, we know what this stuff is, but, you're just stressed out. Like, I mean, all these things. I was misdiagnosed like different ways. I had an alcohol addiction that was really just a mental health condition of serotonin not being, produced naturally. And so I
Mm-hmm.
was self coping. So it took me about 10 years to recover 20 years of my own abuse and then abuse that I had received and suffered from. So I started a safe house, and I was the executive director with the under the guide of a mega church in our area, and we were the first ones to really break ground in this area of Florida. It went wonderfully for about 5 years, and then all of a sudden, I got in a car accident. And this is no joke. Found out I was pregnant, and I know that those two things don't normally go hand in hand, but it was traumatic, and I
No.
couldn't find childcare. And so I had to leave my position as the executive director, which got me here, right? We never know where those steps are going to take us. And if we just stay diligent into the mission and our calling in our life, like, we can't predict what's going to happen. But if we stay the course, you're going to see amazing things happen. So Survivor Led Solutions was literally birthed 3 weeks after my third son was born. And I figured this out. So again, if you're listening and you want to know how to create proposals, walk in with a newborn and a proposal. They can't say no, right? Um,
Oh.
so I said, "Here, hold my baby and read this." And I'm kidding, but I went to law enforcement and said, "I want to train you. I know too much about this stuff. Medical providers, right? Homeless shelters, women's recovery programs." And before I knew it, I was building a program for women's recovery. And I was showing them the continuum of care and how many silos we were in, when we should be a sequential intercept map. And we should be
Mm-hmm.
off ramping victims instead of onboarding them to criminal justice. So that was really cool, which led me to my PhD and needing to continue my education. So I'm actually working with law enforcement and their perceived understanding of human trafficking through their training that's required. And in the state of Florida, there's 4 hours that are mandated, and then 1 hour every year renewal, and they're missing victim identification completely. So
Mm.
that's built me a beautiful partnership locally and across the nation. I've spoke at like the Homeland Security Conference several times, the International Women's Police Conference, just so many, really awesome opportunities to share not just my lived experience, but the training and education that I've received from it, which then got me into working with survivors at a leadership level. So it wasn't just working with the women incarcerated, but now we have to build this top down approach to say, hey, you need to be mentoring, right? You need to be sitting in leadership positions in these organizations that say they do these services so that they're
Mm-hmm.
survivor led, centered, trauma informed, right? And so that's what we're doing now, is building this certification course. And it is a survivor leader certification course that will be about 50 hours. We have 50 women already trained in the first 10 hours. And we're doing it in person and virtually, just depending on, the time of year and how this is all playing out. But it's a beautiful thing. And then finally, we host these retreats, which we just did in Alabama. I rented out a lake house and brought in my publisher and said, hey, these women want to write books. How can we help support that? And so she did writing prompts for a whole week. I cooked 3 meals for 5 days and just let them like exist in their space and get creative and flush some stuff out and get angry, and then we're going to put together what we call a coffee table book. And it's going to be this anthology of survivor stories of empowerment. And then what's really cool is that it becomes its own entity where they can take it and use it for like fundraising or other opportunities to
Oh,
build up their
yeah.
own businesses. So it's very holistic, but also sustainable.
Oh, I love every bit of this and more. I want to go back to
Yeah.
the word human trafficking. I feel like human trafficking, just like the word domestic abuse, is very heavily misunderstood. I know that there are probably people listening to this right now that are like, I don't understand how she was in high school but trafficked. Because we see on movies, right? Human trafficking is like
Mhm.
you get snatched, you get put in a van, you're taken to some crazy place and you're stuck there. Like it's always these huge, conceived theories. The same thing with abuse, right? Normally, when I talk about abuse, the first people think about is the physicalities to it.
Right.
So, can you break down what human trafficking really truly is in a way
Mhm.
that, might end up helping someone that didn't identify like you're saying, just so that we can kind of educate people on what that means. Because yes, I understand there are human trafficking rings and there are people being brought from other countries and things like that going on. And unfortunately, there are smaller things like this that I don't think that we understand because, again, we only perceive this one way that we have been shown.
Mhm.
And I want to make sure that people understand what human trafficking really means.
Sure. So it is a huge definition. And if you look it up, it's the illegal transportation, harboring, or solicitation of people for profit or sex. What that translates down to the layperson is exploitation of vulnerabilities. Exploitation, somebody's taking advantage of you. Vulnerabilities are your weaknesses. So taking advantage of your weaknesses. So just being a child is one vulnerability. Then we start adding them up. So in 1997, Kaiser Permanente did this research on the adverse childhood experiences, right? Thousands of questions were surveyed amongst hundreds of people, and 10 questions got answered yes most predominantly. There were 5 abuses that happened to you and 5 that you witnessed in your household under the age of 18, right? So while you were growing up, doesn't matter what your household consisted of, grandma,
Hmm.
grandpa, foster parents, nuclear family. These 5 abuses that you experienced were things like the physical abuse, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, and neglect. But then you also witnessed things like domestic violence, incarceration, drug and alcohol abuse, um, mental health issues, and suicide and divorce. Like that was like that's a piece of the family dynamic. And so we knew back then in the 90s that Americans scored a average of 4 on out of 10. So we know right now predominantly people get divorced. There's usually physical or verbal abuse associated.
Hmm.
Somebody usually has a mental illness like depression, anxiety, PTSD, right? And then throw in any other of the others, right? Child abuse or incarceration, or think about like mom and dad getting divorced, they get into a fight, mom has depression, dad goes out drinking and gets arrested for a DUI. That's a 4 right there.
Yeah.
That can happen in one night. And so girls predominantly are a score of 7. So they're not only going through all of those things I just said, but then there's these added extra traumas that lead them right down the path to a trafficker, whether that's online, who somebody's pretending to be somebody they're not, and they act like they're a kid and they start creating this relationship, which is called recruiting and grooming, which is what the coach did. So he was looking for boys specifically that he could recruit as like his own buyers. So he never took the fall. He's the trafficker. He's the pimp up here, right? And then
Mm.
he created this line of buyers. So he promised these guys, hey, you don't have to go to college a virgin. I'll hook you up with whatever girl you want and we can make this situation happen for you. Or it was like, if you need a place, that's private for your girlfriend when you want to have a night, romantic night. Like he did that. And then he also did this. He was like, if you missed a test, I'll help you get extra credit. If you have an absence, I will help you get it excused. If you need a uniform or a meal, like he would buy it for them, a ride. He became the person of trust. That's what every trafficker does. And then they do this little piece and they throw in sexual content. So it might be a video, right? It might be, it used to be magazines, right? Or something. Maybe it was indecent exposure to someone else, pulling their pants down and seeing what they would do, right? Like just this thing. And so for my situation, he put on a porn made by 2 of our friends. And like most people sit in shock when I tell them this, but I was like, but he normalized it where people had seen it before. And I was just new to the group. And so then
Mm.
it was even more awkward. Like, what do you do? Now it's peer pressure. So do you respond? Do you react? Do you do anything at all? And I like looked at my friend because we're at his house after a track meet. And he was like, hey, I just want you guys to see this video, but I don't want to be responsible for pushing play. And like the funny kid of the group jumps up and pushes play. And now we're exposed to this porn and there's nothing we can do about it. Right. So I ask kids all the time, like, what would you do? And every so often I get a very brave person that's like, I would tell my parents or I would call the cops. And I'm like, no, you wouldn't. Like, no, you wouldn't. Like the reality is that you're going to be outnumbered, and you're going to sit there and go, I don't even know what to do with that. So let's pretend it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Right. And then he introduces alcohol and drugs, which is predominantly every type of trafficking happens. They introduce you to something, some substance to calm you down, mellow you out, make your body relax, feel good, whatever. And then he invokes the trafficking piece, which is an exchange. So it doesn't have to be money. People get that so confused. The exchange could be a place to stay at night, food, water, shelter. It could be a promise. Hey, I'll give you extra points on the video game or extra skins or extra something in exchange for your participation, right?
Oh,
Send me a
wow.
picture of your naked brother or sister and I'll give you Roblox. Like it is that simple. And for people who are desperate, they don't have things at home like that score of 7, like there's a lot of problems going on. This feels safe and this feels okay because the attention and the needs are being met, right? So food, water, shelter, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so they don't mind it because it's usually not as demeaning at first. There's a comfort in it. And then they flip the script. Every single trafficker will flip the script and go, hey, you owe me. Did you have fun at that party last night? Well, now you got to do this for me. You
Mm.
enjoyed getting that excused absence. You got to do this for me, And if you don't, I'm going to blackmail you. I'm going to threaten you. I'm going to hurt you. And if you really do anything bad, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you and your parents. And like a child specifically, they trust that. They built a relationship with that. And now there's this threat. And so they don't know what to do. And they usually conform to what it is so that they can lessen the punishment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they get themselves in a real hard situation to get out of. So that's why we say hidden in plain sight. And that's why we say it's like hard to leave because you're not actually bound by ropes. It's a mental health issue. And so that's what my situation was. For 3 months, he just sent me to parties and expected me to perform. And if I didn't, he slashed my tires, put dog poop on my windshield, threatened my little brother, threatened to expose me to the school, threatened to pull scholarships from, the universities that I had gotten received from. Like he had that pull and he could make those things happen. And so why wouldn't you believe him?
Yeah.
But then you have my mother. And this is what I would say to anybody who has children. My mother, when she found out, which was not from my mouth, it was from law enforcement who got a tip that something had happened. And they questioned me and I just sort of blurted it out like, yeah, I was raped. Why? Because I don't know, like what else did I have to lose? I was already being
Yeah.
bullied and I was not good in mental health. And so I sort of threatened them back, like, what are you going to do about it? And they told my mom, and my mom said, if not you, then who? Like, who's going to take this guy down? And in the reality of human trafficking, if you get to the part where you're being recruited and groomed, you are a one out of hundreds of others that are being treated the same way because they make up all these identities, right? Like that guy had 33 other victims like me. It wasn't just me. And so I was one out of 33. And when you're just a number like that, right? They don't think you're going to do anything about it because they don't think you have
Yeah.
the confidence and the wherewithal to do it. So she said that to me, and I guess it sort of planted a seed. I wouldn't say that I was like empowered by it right away because I was scared and I just wanted it to, be over with. I wanted to move. I wanted to go to college.
Yeah.
And instead, though, it made me fight. Right? I didn't dismiss it. We didn't brush it under the rug. We didn't pretend like it didn't happen. And going to court was just as hard as going to school. But it was worth it in the end because he gets busted. And not only does he get busted, but it like breaks up his whole ring. And, the guys who did what they did to me, they got 5 years registered sex offenders. So everybody sort of did their time before I really even understood what happened. I didn't really get it.
Yeah.
I just went through with it. But here's the fun fact. He only got 7 years in prison for what he did to me. He goes to law school while he's in prison. He gets out He becomes an executive an executive of an estate for like real estate law. And he embezzles $140,000 from a family in 4 months. And he gets caught again by the same judge that we had 7 years earlier. And now he's in prison for the rest of his life. And I literally have a newspaper clipping from the judge that says, if it wasn't for the girl in the hot tub, we wouldn't know how evil this man was. And so now he's in prison for the rest of his life. So you don't know what your story really is going to do in the future. Like, was it hard for me? Yeah. Like, would I have done it again? Maybe, I don't know, given the situation, but now I literally, I tell parents and girls and boys who are being victimized, like, go after them because they don't think you're gonna. And if you do, so many other victims are going to have restitution and like a release from this. You just don't even know.
Mm-hmm. That's so like crazy to me to know that somebody, especially that close to children in a
Mm-hmm.
school system, can do that. And yes, I understand that we live in a world where there is evil, right? It is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not what you want to think of, right? Especially when you think about your kids and who they're surrounded with and things like that. And I know that you and I talked about this beforehand, and I kind of want to bring it up here as well,
Sure.
is the simple fact that people also need to be aware of the trust and the identity that people have built up of who they are. We talked about this beforehand, where so many times people come forward and the people of the town or the people around there that know that person for that persona they have always been refuse to believe that they could possibly do
Right.
what it is that they did, right? So, is there any indicators that you think
Mhm.
people could be aware of, right? I don't want us to go around like not trusting anyone, like, oh, this
No,
is a
you
super
can't
nice
live like
person, I
that.
need to watch, right? But I do feel like, as you said, there are patterns and things like that. And I'm curious if you have any items or personality things, just things to be aware of that might be a little bit of a red flag, that while this person may sound absolutely wonderful or seem one certain way, there are still some things that leak through that could give us some ideas of something else.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we don't have an exact profile. We don't have an exact profile of like a mass murderer or school shooter yet either, but we're
Hmm.
gaining more insight, right? So much like where domestic violence and human trafficking can kind of correlate is that you got to have narcissism. This person has to believe that they are, God's gift to green earth, right? Like they see themselves in the front and center. They usually have these gaslighting sort of behaviors, like it's all your fault, if something goes wrong. Like they'll say like this to kids, like, you can't tell your parents about us because you'll get in trouble. Like
Mm,
that phrase right there is huge, right? They usually come off very gift giving, very affirmation building. So this person will feel really good to you, but it's almost like why? So they say these phrases. This is something that's in my book, and I call them isolated compliments. You're the prettiest girl I've ever met. You're the smartest in your class. Your parents don't want you to grow up. They separate you from your peer group with a compliment, right?
interesting.
So that's very intentional because it builds this rapport and trust very quickly. They're always going to be funny, charismatic, and good looking. Like they're not the creepy person under the bridge trying to sell you meth. Like that's not what they're doing. That's where you end up, right? You start with credibility, with clout, with the ability to make these big, bold moves under the radar because no one expects it. So, we've seen everything from doctors and pastors and teachers, right, to be able to do that because they have access to kids. That's the other thing that you got to be aware of. They have access. So we always say that, like, where are predators? Wherever kids
Hmm.
are, the mall, the park, right? But it doesn't mean that every person is doing that. So we teach people safe people versus tricky people, right? So a safe person would never ask a kid to do something that an adult should do. So for example, when I go onto a like school campus, I'm going to go give a speech. I don't go up to a child and go, "Where's the principal's office?" I try to find another adult, okay, and then help me. And I do that consciously. Now I understand like most people wouldn't even consider that. But a tricky person is absolutely going to scout out several kids and talk to them. right?
Interesting.
So that's like one piece. If it's like doing something, like I said, that an adult should do. So maybe it's like giving passwords or, locks to something, having some sort of authority, and like he's letting or she's letting kids have special permission to access those things. That's a tricky person, right?
Mm,
So we're looking for that. One example was like this. This happened in a hospital in the lobby. So this mom came in. She had a child with a broken leg or whatever. Right, he fell skateboarding, and there was an older brother and a younger brother that had to stay in the lobby and she had to go back to the operating room. And when she did, she's like, "You watch your brother. Don't go anywhere. Don't talk to strangers. Whatever." Right, and she has to leave. Well, this guy comes out of the bathroom and goes up to the kids and says, "Hey, I can't get my son to come out of the bathroom. Like, can you talk to him? Can you help me?" That's a tricky person, right? So those are sort of the things that we're trying to teach kids. But otherwise, profile, it doesn't matter, right? They can be any color, any ethnicity, any religion.
mm-hmm.
That doesn't matter. It can be women, it can be men. It's more or less that persona that they think they're greater than the rest, and they act like it, and they showboat, and they buy things for no reason, like lavish gifts for no real reason, just because they like you.
I think that the other piece of this too, I feel like also falls back on the parents, which is we as parents have to learn to be more communicative with our kids.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that
Absolutely.
is because I was this parent and I had to train myself not to be this way because I realized what it did to me. So, when I was growing up, and I have a wonderful family, I love my family, but it was more of like, don't do stupid crap, right? Don't
Mhm.
come home with this, don't do this. I'd whip your butt if you did this. So there was this fear tactic that was
Right,
there. And unfortunately, because that was there, it meant that if things happened, I didn't want to come tell them because I didn't feel like they would listen to me. I felt like I was going to be punished. When
right,
my boys started getting into grade school or middle school and things like that, I always told them I would rather you come to me and me be upset about it, than you go off and do something stupid, right? And then you end up getting hurt. And yes, I'm sure there are a lot of parents like I tell my kids you can come to me about anything. So did my parents. But the way that you conversate with your kids outside of that phrase is what makes the difference, right? So
right.
if my kids, for instance, when my oldest one wrecked one of his cars and I got the phone call, the first thing before I was irritated was I was like, are you at least okay? Are you good? Right. So it's putting that care ahead instead of the reactiveness
Right.
and being irritated about everything else, because those are the moments that stay, right? If your child comes home and they're like, hey, I wasn't supposed to be doing this, but they were in the bathroom and they were all vaping and I felt like I needed to and I did. The first thing that comes out of your mouth shouldn't be, how freaking dare you, right? The first thing that comes out of your mouth is, I thank you so much for telling me.
Right.
And then having the conversation. I think that that's the bigger thing because my parents always did that. If you ever want to try anything, you just come to us. I'll be damned. Not with the way that my parents talked to me. Absolutely not. Like I hid my pregnancy at 16 for almost 5 months because I did not want them to know because all I knew is that they were going to be extremely disappointed in me, right?
Right.
So I think that that's very important on the parental side. Anyone that is
Right.
dealing with children, I don't care if you're their parent, their aunt, their uncle, whatever the case may be, they need a safe space to know where they can actually be honest. And instead of being punished for being honest, we can always talk about things that need to happen, don't need to happen, what's going to go down because of it. But it's the way that you approach that conversation in the beginning that I think really opens up the ability for someone to be able to come forward, right? And say,
Yeah.
hey, I didn't want to be a part of this and I don't know what to do with it, but you feel comfortable enough to talk to another adult to be able to get it out.
Right. And I think that you hit it on the head with the disappointment. We don't want to disappoint our parents, even if they are abusive to us. Like we
Absolutely.
have the internal, right, like motivation to please them. And so that was my struggle, and many victims, because I went to my best friend, I went to my coworker and told them all in the same day, I think something bad happened to me, and they all silenced me. So why would I go to my parents if my friends are saying, hey, this is not what really happened? Then my
Hmm.
parents surely wouldn't know, you know? And
Yep.
so that was the first piece that I try to tell parents too is like, you need to know their friends. Like you need to know who they're hanging out with, and online it is a different world than when I grew up and now my kids, that's the first thing everybody says to me. You probably don't let your kids spend the night anywhere. You probably don't let your kids play video games. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to like live like that because if I live like that, what generation are they going to create?
Yeah.
So we have to have those very open conversations. And I'm not doing it perfect, but I will tell you that when my kids were 3 and 5 years old and they were about to start school, the first thing I did in the bathtub was we don't hit, we don't kick, we don't push, right? Right. We also don't lick, we don't kiss, we don't hug, we don't touch people if they don't want to be touched. Okay. They're like, right. And then I'm like, we don't show our privates to others and they don't show them to us. Because if they do, you need to come tell mom, right? So if you
Hmm.
get hit, you get pushed, you get kicked, you get licked, you get kissed, you get somebody shows their privates, you're going to tell mom, right? And I made it so normal in conversation. And things did happen at schools where little Carly kissed my 3-year-old. And I said, "What'd you do, buddy?" And he's like, "I pushed her." And I'm like, oh, so close. So we go over it again. And my 5-year-old, though, there's this kid who's looking under the porter or the potties and like trying to see his privates. And he didn't know what to do. And he screams for the teacher and nothing happens. So he hits him with the door. And I'm like, I can't stop you from protecting yourself. I
Yeah.
want you to protect yourself, right? It's kind of that like don't throw the first punch sort of thing, but you better finish it
Yep.
sort of mentality, right? But I'm constantly trying to get them to go and talk to somebody that they can trust. So finally I was like, you need to have a password with your teacher. I told the teacher, like my kid's password with you, for example, is Doritos. So if he says he's hungry for Doritos, that means he needs your attention. He needs to tell you something serious. And that really worked, getting them into the next place. And yes, kids will abuse it for a little bit and be like, I don't really have anything. But what they really want though is one-on-one attention, right?
Hmm.
So now that my kids are like 11 and 8, not only do they know right from wrong when it comes to bodily space and what's appropriate, but now they're asking stuff about drugs. They're asking stuff about, vaping and all those things. They're
Hmm.
telling me when they see something inappropriate on the video game. And they're able to go spend the night at somebody else's house knowing what their plan is in place. Right. So we've been doing this progressively with age appropriate responses since they were tiny. And I think that is so much easier. It's not going to be scary and weird when it's time to talk about puberty, which is getting there right now. And like, it's an open conversation. And I am all boy. I'm a boy mom, right? Like, so I have to have the weird conversations and I have to teach them about female body parts so that
Yeah.
they don't abuse them later, not knowing and being ignorant and not being shy about these conversations because that's a human, and we have to humanize humans, not objectify them. So there's a lot of moving pieces, but when it comes to parents that, well, let's say it's too late, like something happened, my
Hmm.
first reaction is that this happened recently with a mom with a son who was being groomed by a woman who was pretending to be a child. And she got, they busted it. And now mom's instinct was take his phone, block social media, take his sister's phone, like all these like punitive responses. And I was like,
Hmm.
did you take him to get ice cream? And she looked at me like I'm crazy. I was like, he told you the truth. I think it's time to reward him, you know, and give him his phone back because otherwise he's going to steal somebody else's and borrow somebody else's and you have no control. Give him
Yeah.
his phone back and start asking questions and start having sit downs. And God forbid, don't just ask how their day went. What's something they like engaged with? Who did they help today? Right? Like start doing proactive conversations with kids because that's what they need. It's what they want. And so if you
Hmm.
haven't built it, it's not too late. It's just reinvent how you say it. And I think you hit it. It was like, come with this, like, good job, dude. Like,
Yeah.
I appreciate you telling
Absolutely.
me that. And
Yeah.
now let's talk about how we're gonna make it different.
Yeah, and I was a late bloomer with having those conversations with my kids. My oldest one was 14 when I was still working through my own crap with all the things that I had been through. And so it took several years before him and I could have conversations, like that. So, and he's 21 now. But I hear everything, not always everything that I want to hear.
Right.
Especially being a boy mom. I'm like, I don't have to be in all these conversations, but we have become kind of the hub as well, right? When their friends come over, they know they can openly talk about things. And to be honest, I love that for the simple fact that you never know what's going on in someone's home. And unfortunately, there are spaces where the parents aren't as open. And if they're open enough to talk with us, that means I can help them. And if I hear something, I can make sure to take action on it, and try to help them through it. But I just want people to understand that like it is so important to build this level of trust with your kids. And I understand that a lot of people, that's not what we think. When we think trust,
Mhm.
we're like, oh, I just tell them if they want to do it, they can try it. Your actions and the way that you handle situations is how they're going to build that trust, just like you do with any other person that's in your life. And I
Mhm.
think that, and like you said, the more open-ended conversations have to be normalized
Mhm.
because that's how we keep people away. That's how people realize that they can't get by with crap as easily because you are so comfortable with it, or you have had the conversation, or it's easy for someone to say no or yell for help instead of, like you said, you just like froze, like you didn't even know what to do. Like you just wanted to pretend like it didn't happen.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that that's so important because, again, I didn't have a lot of those conversations growing up. It was kind of one of those like, just don't do this and don't do that and stay away from people that do this kind of crap. And then we were just supposed to figure it out without our prefrontal cortex even formed. We
Right.
were supposed to
Even
make this
more.
logical decision, right? And it's
Right.
like, and that's how I raised my kids for the longest time because I'm like, I mean, that's how I was
Mhm.
raised.
Right.
But when you really start looking, I realized how many situations that I was in where I didn't know how to say no, or I didn't know how to push someone away, and I allowed things to happen. Um, and now I'm having to deal with that at 38, right?
Right.
So anyway, it's just so important to make sure that we are communicating. Like you said, you're asking questions and not just a simple fun, oh, how was your day? Like really asking questions and getting your kids to talk to you. Yes, I know teenagers don't always want to talk. However, I will tell you, my kids were both teenagers. My youngest one is 18. They talk my head off about anything and everything. I hear about the things they looked up online that they didn't like, the stupid things that their friend did that they thought was stupid that they showed them, and everything in between. So I
Right.
promise you, if you
You have to
bring an
just build
open,
that. Yeah.
yeah, if you bring an open form of communication, they will come out to you. Now I know
Well,
that,
I was gonna say, can I throw in two
yeah,
more
yeah, no,
little
please go
pieces of
ahead.
advice? So one thing that I learned was you have to have 10 ways to say no. Like you have to teach your kids 10 different ways.
Ooh,
And it might start with like silence is a no, right? No, no, thank you. But then it might be like, no, last time we got in trouble. No, I can't because I have homework. No, last time it made like go all the way to screaming and now and practice them because some things that are appropriate for kicking and screaming might be actually handled with a different type of no or vice versa, right? Like you're not going hard enough because peer pressure is real, right?
mm-hmm.
And to do that. And then the second thing I learned a lot was trying to gauge like your social support and like learning what like a real friend is versus somebody who's using you, right? And if there's always a contingency or always a consequence with saying yes to this
Yeah,
person, right, you owe them, like that's not your friend, so don't practice that sort of stuff.
mm-hmm.
So I wrote the book with the intention of getting people to have all these new tools that they didn't know that they actually had access to and practicing them, right? Like when do you do a safety plan? It's not when you're in crisis, it's when you're safe. So you know
Yeah.
what you should feel like, right? When safety arrives. So yeah, I'm a big proponent on like give your kids tools. Like don't just expect them to know how to say no or not know how to do something.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and I love the 10 ways to say no. I've never thought about that. So that's really
It's
that's
really
really
fun to role
interesting.
play. I do it in
Okay.
training. Like I'll get even just four ways, right? So I'll get like four people to stand up and I'll say, you say no, thank you. You say no, last time you got in trouble. You say no, I'm, gonna go to jail or whatever. And then you say, ah, and you start fighting. And then I ask the same question. Do you want to get high? No, thank you. Do you want to get high? No, last time we got in trouble. Do you want to get high? No, I'll go to jail. You want to get high? Ah! Like which one's appropriate? Because you don't know until you're there. And then all of a sudden, this is
Yeah.
a real thing. Do you want to vape? No, last
Yeah.
time I got in trouble. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a huge thing right now that, yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
We have to conversate more. I think that's the biggest thing. Yes, I understand that kids are going to screw up. And like you said, peer pressure is so real. And it's really interesting how, like, once we become an adult and get to a certain age, it's almost like we completely forget about all of that. And then so as our kids are going through, we're like, just grow up, get over it. It's not a big deal. Learn to do this.
Right.
Like, don't let people bother you. And I think that we completely forget that, like, we at one point were in those situations where we had to
Hmm.
figure things out, or we didn't have people to talk to, or we had to deal with things that we didn't want to deal with. And so that's been a really big thing for me with my kids is anytime that they bring anything to me that I'm like, it's not that hard. If you would just do, I have to really put myself back at that age bracket and be like, what would I have
Hmm.
done around that time, right? Or how did I handle things, right? Okay,
Right.
drama was a little bit more of a thing when I was in high school. Now I could care less about it, right? But it's really hard to tell someone that high school is their whole world, be like, well, once you grow up, it's not going to
Right.
matter anyway. Like you can't just tell them that, right?
No.
So it's being able to relate to them and listen to them. That's been a huge
Right.
one. Even if I don't fully understand, I'm just like, okay, I kind of remember being in these situations. I remember coming home and being drama with my parents with things. Okay, this is normal. And just kind of letting it ride instead of shutting them down.
Right.
I think that that's made a big difference. So as we're coming to a close, I know that you have a wonderful website that everybody can go to. I know that you also have survivor resources on there. I know that you have your retreats. How often do you do your retreats?
Probably once or twice a year. So we just did the first
Okay.
one. We'll do another one in the fall. And you get a part of the organization, and then we invite you to a retreat, and then it's really based on availability. And the best part about it for survivors is that the only thing I ask is for you to get there. Everything else is taken care of. So if we can help with transportation, we will. But most of the time, it's we provide the food, the bedding, the activities, everything else is covered.
Okay, awesome. That's awesome. And then your book is on the website as well, Brave Girl Diaries. I love that
Mhm.
name, by the way. I think
It,
that's so
thank
awesome.
you. It's on
Very.
Amazon and at Barnes and Noble.
Oh, I love that.
Yes.
Yay, congratulations. Is there anything that you would want to make sure that people hear? If there's one thing that you could tell people before we kind of end for today, and I also want people to know where they can find you as well, but is there anything you'd like to leave anybody with?
I am ready to come wherever you are. That's the biggest thing that we're at right now is making sure this message is heard, that it's not just like 101, but here's like tools and tactics on how to fight it. Here's how to prevent it, right? And here's if something bad happens, like I have a network of survivor leaders across the nation that are like leading and helping build programs. So just about every state is represented under SLS right now. So that's a really cool resource just to know. And then look out for book two. It's coming around Christmas time. So get book one right now so that book two makes a whole lot more sense.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I love that across the nation. That is so cool. And then tell everybody how can they follow you? How can they find you? How can they be in your
Sure.
world?
We're on Facebook, Survivor Led Solutions. We're on Instagram. I am learning how to TikTok, and we're on LinkedIn, all under the same.
I have not
I'm
touched
learning.
TikTok yet, so I get it, Alicia.
I don't want to
I
sound
can't
old, but let me just
I
tell you, my time
yeah.
is limited.
Yeah, nope, I'm right there with you. So thank you so much for sharing your time today, the information, and for sharing your story, because I know that that's going to resonate with so many people.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Kat.
Absolutely. And to everybody else that's listening, of course, we'll make sure we have all that information in the show notes. We'll make it super easy for you to find Alicia, get in touch with her if you need her services, if you know of someone that might need her services. Please be sure to get to her website, reach out. I'll make sure that you get in touch with her and her organization. I think that we're in a space where it's time for us to learn that we're not alone as much as we seem
Mhm.
to think that we are. And while there are a lot of things being talked about, there's still things like this that unfortunately are more common than we think. And it's time to start having those conversations. And it really is time for us to start having those conversations with our kids. I have nieces and nephews I'm going to be talking about with these things and stuff like that. Let's start educating so that these predators and these people cannot get to the younger generation. So we can have a better world that we always talk about. So Alicia, thank you again for being a part of the podcast today. I so appreciate that. To everybody else that's out there, I hope you got some amazing takeaways today. Until next time, do one thing positive for someone each and every day and see the difference that it makes in your life. Catch you later. Thank you so much for tuning in to Real Chat with Kat today, where real stories meet real solutions. If you loved today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review on Apple, and share this with someone who may also need to hear this as well. Let's also keep the conversation going. Follow me on socials at The Lotus Effect, connect with our incredible guests, and remember, you are never alone. Your story matters, and you have the ability and the power to rewrite it. You always have a choice. Until next time, stay strong, stay inspired, and keep showing up as the incredible, unstoppable